Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
This segment was going to happen. We have, and we're privileged to have on the phone, we have Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl, who is an assistant professor of economics at the University of Central Arkansas and an Arkansas Center for Research and Economics scholar on the line. Dr. Horpedahl, welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks, Paul. We're glad to be here.
And then we also have Mr. Jacob Bundrick, who is a policy analyst with the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, also at UCA. Jacob, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Paul. Always glad to be on.
Absolutely. Now, the reason, and I've been looking forward to this all week, because you guys authored together a policy paper on Arkansas's spending habits, and it really takes a long view of this. And I'll tell you, we have been talking about Arkansas's out-of-control spending habits for a long time now. And so this paper really, showed up on my radar. And it's tell us a little bit about the Mercatus Center over at George Mason University and how this paper is affiliated with that institution.
Yeah, sure, Paul. This is Jeremy Horpedahl. The Mercatus Center at George Mason is, in some ways, it's like ACRE. It's a university-based research center, but they're much bigger than ACRE, and they cover both federal and policy issues in all the states. When I was a graduate student at George Mason University, I was a fellow there when I was writing my dissertation, so I've had a long relationship with them going back about 10 years. So this is a paper that they asked us, or we kind of talked about doing. They've done a few of these reports for other states, and they thought Arkansas might be really interesting. And so they said, you'd be a perfect one to do this. And, I just got to Arkansas. This was about 2 years ago. We started working on this. And Jacob had a lot of the knowledge, since he's a native Arkansan, of things going on here. So that's how it relates to, this is a Mercatus product, even though we're both at ACRE.
Yeah.
But, we all kind of change hats now and then.
Yeah, and Jacob, he mentioned you are a native Arkansan, and we're going to get to the specifics of this paper here in just a minute, because I've got some questions. But, was there anything shocking to you that you didn't know about the spending? I'm going to describe it throughout this interview as a spending problem, because I think we're spending too much money. Did anything shock you, Jacob?
Well, growing up in Arkansas, you kind of get used to the status quo that we've had here. But anytime you take a really thorough look into anything, really, particularly something as expansive as Arkansas state spending, you're always going to find something that you really didn't know about. So through the course of working on this paper, I think that I found several things that I don't know if they were, I term them as shocking necessarily, but things that I wasn't aware of beforehand. So I learned a lot in the process of going through the history of Arkansas spending.
Let's just dive right in, and you guys feel free to take whichever question you feel comfortable with, or if you both want to answer it, that's fine as well. For example, I'm going to just quote a few lines of the report. So on page 6. The high level of spending in Arkansas is especially concerning because Arkansas is a very low-income state. Using most measures of income, Arkansas is regularly ranked as one of the 3 poorest states. So do these data points show us that even though Arkansas has continued to grow government spending year after year, it's done little to alleviate poverty and stagnant income, and might actually be hurting Arkansans from seeing economic growth? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of research to show, a relationship between, or negative relationship between government spending generally and tax levels and how state incomes grow. Right? Arkansas has been a low-income state for a long time, and we can just bemoan that if we want, but I think we should look at how do you make Arkansas wealthier and richer. And large government spending levels and high tax levels are shown in research to lower rates of economic growth, which means over time we're just going to stay behind if we continue with the same sorts of policies. So yeah, there's, we're low and very low income state, in bottom 3 in most categories, as you said. That means that for us to spend this much, it's a very high percentage of people's income. And I should also say that even if you take out federal transfer money, you take that out, we're still at the top among our neighboring states. So you can take all that out, but even of our own money, we still spend the most. We've got a table in the paper on that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also means that this is not the way that you get out of poverty. Right? Government spending, high levels of taxes are not the solution to poverty. In many ways, they're one cause of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, my question is, in terms of the amount of spending that has grown since, you guys charted this from 1951 all the way to 2013. And you've got an interesting statistic here. In 1951, we spent, listen to this, folks, $770 per person to run government. Now we're spending $6,791 per person. And I want to be clear, that is adjusted to inflation. So that is in 2013 dollars when you look going from $770 per person in 1951 to almost $7,000 in 2013. So this growth in spending, and then you have one of the most poor states. Is it possible that the reason we have stagnant wages, stagnant household income, is because too much of our money's going to the government?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, if you look at that era, before 1950 and into the 1960s, Arkansas actually had a lot of great entrepreneurship going on before then. We still have some today. We had a lot. So if you look at our, we have now 5 or 6 Fortune 500 companies, changes every year. But of those, all of them were founded in 1962 or earlier. So we have a lot of Fortune 500 companies based here, but they're all very old companies. So we've had a lot of government growth recently and haven't had really any entrepreneurship to show for it in terms of new big companies. Walmart, our biggest company in the world, they're the newest of all our Fortune 500 companies, and they're a pretty old company.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually never thought of that. That's so it definitely shows that we've got really just a lot of work to do. On page 12,
I think it also shows that
go ahead.
You do have the potential, right? And there's a lot of good, hardworking people here, a lot of good ideas. It's just being stifled for some reason in recent decades, and I think the large burden of government is at least the major thing, if not the only thing that's driving that.
Mm-hmm. You guys talked about something in your paper that we haven't talked about a lot on this program, and I don't really hear a lot of politicians ever talk about it very much. And that's Arkansas's unfunded liabilities. I think it was page 12. You got a figure that equates unfunded liabilities or off-balance sheet government debt, more than $20 billion for the state. And I know you guys had a lot of ideas at the end of the paper about reform. So what reform, when it comes to our unfunded liabilities, do we need to see to address $20 billion debt? I mean, you specifically mentioned shifting from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans. Can you explain that? What does that even mean to the audience? What does that mean?
Sure. So we got into this issue because one of the main big areas of spending growth over the past 2 decades has been public pensions. That's kind of exploded in the past few years, and it's going to keep growing. So we were starting to think about, well, how do you limit that? And the most basic way is you stop letting new people get into the pension system and put them on some other plans. So traditional pensions are what are called defined benefit plans. So your benefit is defined, by law if it's a public pension or by contract if it's a private pension. And you just know when I retire, I'm going to get this much of whatever my income was, whether it's your best 10 years or there's all different formulas. It's defined what your benefit is. But, depending on how long you live, this can be a huge liability for, especially now we're talking about public pensions for the state. If you have, a generous or even a small pension, if you live a long time, which people do now, these pensions can be very expensive for the state, and they often aren't putting away enough money to, according to the accounting of this, for it to be there. There's not enough money put away, which means it's going to have to come out of higher taxes in the future. What we suggest moving to are what are called defined contribution plans, which are very common in the private sector. 401ks are the most popular, so that'd be the most popular type of defined contribution. But even the nonprofit sector, they have something called a 403B. At UCA, I'm part of TIAA, which is a defined contribution plan for people that work at universities. UCA even, and most Arkansas universities have done this. Last year, we said no one new at UCA can move into the pension system, the state pension system. Before, you used to have the option. You can go into this defined contribution where the money's in your account, or you can have a traditional pension. UCA doesn't allow that anymore, and that's what most universities have moved away from. But for most state employees, that's still what they're in, is this pension system, which is great for them, but it's going to be very expensive for future taxpayers.
Wow. And I saw, you guys have one chart, and we've showed it on the program before. I mean, it really shows breaks down the amount of spending increases, from 1951 to 2013. And it's certainly, you've got Medicaid in there, you've got education in there, and you have these pensions in there as well. And, this is something, again, that doesn't get a lot of attention. But, I mean, in the right economic downturn, I mean, this could get really serious really quickly, correct?
Yeah, and especially because the pensions are really the hardest thing to cut. If things got really bad with the budget, we could say, we're getting rid of Arkansas Works. Like, you could just do that, and you're essentially going back to what it was 5 years ago, right? But with people's pensions that are retired, it's almost impossible to cut those. So that's kind of like the last thing you would ever cut.
Mm-hmm.
But that means that they put an enormous strain on the budget when they get so big in terms of this, $20 billion unfunded liability. That becomes a real challenge of how you would fund those if the state kind of runs out of other people's money.
Yeah. We're gonna take a quick break. We've got Mr. Jacob Bundrick and Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl with us for the next hour until we get to 5 o'clock. So we've got a lot more to get to. I want to talk about how Arkansas does stack up against other states, because a lot of people, guys, they might be out there thinking, this is every state. Every state has seen this growth in government, and you guys have statistics, according to this report, that show that, no, we're in a unique situation here. I mean, we're a big government state, and we need a lot of reform. So you guys hang on the line. Folks, we're going to take a break. The Liberty Machine rolls on back here in just a moment. Arkansas small businesses are tired of taxes that are too high and regulations that work as obstacles to small business success. If you own a small business, it's time to take action. Now, I'm not talking about the local chambers of commerce. I'm talking about an organization that's actually run by small business owners and are fighting for small businesses right here in the state of Arkansas. They're called Conduit for Action, and they're on your side. Conduit for Action is here not to get something from the government, but to be left alone by the government. Think of them as your personal advocate for limited government at the Capitol in Little Rock. If you're tired of all the politicians talking with no results and ready for action, start outsourcing your government affair needs with Conduit for Action. Go now to conduitforaction.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforaction.org, and stand up for small business in Arkansas. Do you need to advertise your business product or service, but not sure what the best choice is? Folks, allow me to introduce you to talk radio. You're listening to it right now. Talk radio is one of the most unique mediums in all of advertising because it actually works. It gets the information you want to the people you want to get it to. And by the way, those people are educated, well-informed decision makers of their household, and most of them have disposable income. If this is a target audience for your business, then you have to consider advertising on my show, The Paul Harrell Program. We have options for most any budget and can provide you with exciting opportunities to grow your business. We can put your message across the state, or we can help you locally. Call 870-275-9755 if you have any questions. That's 870-275-9755, or visit my website, paulharrell.com, and click on Advertise.
Paul Harrell, your voice for limited government and small business in Arkansas.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us on the line, we've got Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl. He is a Arkansas Center for Research and Economics scholar, also assistant professor in economics at the University of Central Arkansas, and also Jacob Bundrick, the policy analyst from ACRE. Welcome back, guys. So glad that you could take the time to talk to us about this incredible paper on Arkansas spending.
Yes, sir. We're happy to be here talking about it.
We appreciate all the attention you give this paper. We didn't expect this. This is great. We love it.
Well, I mean, it's really valuable stuff. I've been trying to tell people, look, we've got a spending problem here in Arkansas. Some of our politicians call it a revenue problem, but specifically, let's put into perspective. Can you guys help me put into perspective how different Arkansas is compared to other comparable states? You've got some of those comparable states, Virginia, Alabama, North Carolina, but then, of course, our border states, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas. Talk a little bit about the spending habits of Arkansas compared to those states.
Sure. Just in broad terms, and we're here, we focus mostly on state spending. We mostly ignore the local spending, except when you get to education, because it's really important there. But when you look at just state spending, Arkansas spends, this is from 2014. Actually, I have the latest numbers, the latest ones we could find. From 2015, Arkansas spends almost $8,000 per person, $7,991. $8,000 per person at the state level. For what we call the competitor states, which is 12 other states that are in our region or bordering us, they spend a little under $5,000, so about $4,915. So about $8,000 per person in Arkansas versus about $5,000 on average in these other 12 states. And it's not like there's even one that stands out. The next highest one is Mississippi at just a little over $6,000. So we're at about $8,000 per person. Mississippi's at about $6,000. They're the second highest. Then after that, you get to, Louisiana and Oklahoma are kind of right there with Mississippi. But you get down to the Carolinas, they're about 4,500. So we're at about 8,000. They're about 4,500. And then you get even down into Missouri and Florida, and they're under $4,000 per person. So half of us. Now, part of that, I should say, is because we have a much more centralized government spending system in Arkansas. A lot less is done locally, and what is done locally with property taxes mostly flows through the state treasury anyway. Some of those other states like Missouri just do it in a more decentralized, localized way. But we think that's something we should be concerned with too, that there are some problems with centralization, not just, Washington, D.C. centralization, but even centralization within Arkansas. We think that's an issue. But yeah, so we're much higher than any other state that's near us when you look at it. Yeah. State level spending per person.
And talk about table number 3 in your report as well, where it is the per person state spending as a percentage of per capita income. Kind of break that down for us, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. So this is taking kind of that same number, but then dividing it through by how much income do people have, right? This is essentially saying how much of your income is going to pay for government services. At the state level, Arkansas, about 33.5%, so about a third of your income. For all the others, the average is about 19%. So we're at 33%. It's 19% on average for these other 12 states that we looked at. Again, Mississippi is the next closest. They're at about 29.5%. So we're at 33.5%. It's 19% of people's income. In other states, take out federal money, it doesn't make much difference. Take out federal money, so just our own money, 24% of personal income. In Arkansas, average 12.5% for these other 12 states. So we're about twice as much. If you look at it that way.
Gosh.
So just a lot more.
Yeah.
And again, some of that's because we're more centralized, but I don't think we can just brush it off by saying that. That's an important thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly. The word centralization. I mean, that's not a good thing in my mind. When we're talking about government, that's not something that I want to hear. Yeah, Arkansas is more centralized than the other states around us. That's like that means less local control is what I hear of when I think that, or think of when I hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is true for a lot of different types of spending, roads, prisons, but it's especially true for education. Jacob's done a lot of research on this. So I don't know, Jacob, you want to talk about how that centralization in education works just quickly, and maybe let's follow up.
Yeah. So education is a big piece of Arkansas's budget, and it's grown pretty dramatically since 1992. And as a lot of people from Arkansas probably know, that has a lot to do with the Lakeview court case. And what that basically was is back in 1992, the state Supreme Court said that the state system of financing the public education system was unconstitutional. So the legislature went in and they developed two plans over the course of this court case. The first one was the Equitable School Finance Plan, and basically what that did was pool state and local resources to divide among the school districts in the state. But one of the big things that happened as a part of that was that Amendment 74 was passed, and Amendment 74 set the minimum property tax at 25 mils. The other big thing that the plan did was ensure that the state's poorest districts got at least 80% of the per-student funding that the state's 95th percentile district received. So the idea behind that was to get equitable funding across these school districts. So originally, that plan appeased the state Supreme Court, but it was again challenged in the early 2000s, and it was declared unconstitutional again. And the state Supreme Court issued about 10 reasons for why that was. I won't get into all those reasons, but it was things along the lines of, we had abysmal benchmark scores, there was disparities in teacher salaries. So the legislature meets again, and with the help of some consultants, develop a per-student funding matrix. Mm-hmm. And the way that this matrix works is it's a bunch of line items of things deemed necessary to provide an adequate education for each student, right? So things like school teachers, supplies, administration, all these different costs.
Let's hold that right there. Hold that right there. We're up against a hard break. We'll be right back with Jacob Bundrick. He's going to finish up on this massive growth of education spending that we've seen when you look at this paper. Great paper, and we'll give you more information when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Talk to you a little bit about ITEX. They are the techs to trust. Business owners, it could happen to you. We've got cyber warfare going on. You've got ransomware going on. And I'm just going to say, don't let it happen to you. You need to protect your business. And ITEX knows protecting your business is protecting your data, which is protecting your bottom line. So ask yourself, are you really prepared to handle the growing threat of cyber criminals and ransomware? At ITEX, they are committed to helping you to deploy the best security solutions to protect your business and your bottom line. Because security threats are constantly evolving, you need a managed IT service provider. So be proactive now and equip your business with the best cybersecurity available with ITEX. Call them today. Free consultation. It costs you nothing, but you don't want to be, you want to be proactive. You don't want to be like, hey, what's a Bitcoin? How do I buy Bitcoin so I can get my data back? You don't want to be in that situation. Call ITEX today. 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778 or itexusa.com. Back in just a moment.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We are here again. This is our fourth segment with Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl, Assistant Professor of Economics at the University of Central Arkansas and a scholar at the Arkansas Center for Research in Economics, and Mr. Jacob Bundrick, Policy Analyst with the Arkansas Center for Research in Economics. I want to talk about some of your reform ideas. They've been with us all hour, and so if you've missed it, you can get it on Facebook Live Archive. You can get it at the YouTube channel or at paulherald.com. I want to talk to you guys about the solutions to Arkansas's out-of-control spending. That's my characterization, but I think your paper clearly defines that we have a problem that is unlike anybody else in the nation when it comes to our poverty and the levels that we've increased spending since 1951. Also, I want to note, feel free to comment about this. You guys also had another interval. You went from 1951 to 2013, but then you went from modern day, 1992 to 2013. And from 92 to 2013, Arkansas spending adjusted for inflation has increased 97%. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's adjusted for inflation and population. So per person in real terms, it's basically doubled over about 20 years.
And,
I think people know since 51 there's a lot more spending. Sure, things have changed, but not a lot's changed since the early 90s. But spending's about doubled per person in Arkansas since then.
Unbelievable. That alone says, hey, you conservatives who are running this government, or you that claim to be, it's time for actual reform, not just campaign rhetoric. So let's get to some of your reform ideas. Specifically, this to me would be the most important. I'd love to know, on page 36, quote, one improvement could be to include a feature similar to Colorado's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, in which tax revenue growth beyond inflation and population growth is refunded to taxpayers. I think you just mentioned this. Is this at least a way to curtail the spending problem in Arkansas? Do you guys support this idea?
Yeah, I think something like that. These are generally called tax and expenditure limits, and about half the states, a little more than half the states, have some version of this. Colorado's was just the strongest when it was passed. They essentially limit how much government spending can grow. The formula used in Colorado, and 5 other states do this too, is inflation plus population. So if you got 2% inflation, 1% population growth, that's 3%. That means government spending can only grow 3% that year. Mm. And if tax revenue grows more than that, it's refunded directly to the people. So it caps the growth in government spending, or actually it's government tax revenue that it caps in this case. Something like that, we think, would be a great addition to our Revenue Stabilization Act, which protects us from the downside of going bankrupt, but it also exposes us to the upside of big government.
Yeah.
And so this would, keep government within bounds. We're not going to go bankrupt, but we're also not going to have, this runaway growth we've had the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Most of the reforms we talk about are not about necessarily slashing spending now, but trying to keep it contained over the long run through changes in how we budget. So something like Colorado passed, they passed this in 1992. They've actually since weakened it, I would say mostly because it was doing its job.
Yeah.
And people didn't, the new regime and government didn't like that, so they kind of weakened it a little bit. But there are 5 states that still have a pretty strong restriction like this.
Yeah, taxpayer bill of rights. I like the idea of it. I think it's really, really good. And some more reform ideas. Let's talk about corporate welfare. We mentioned incentives earlier on page 35. Arkansas's economic development incentive programs should be eliminated. Now, this is like, to some people in government, that's like sky is falling, apocalypse level ideas. I completely agree. But I just want to commend you. This is a reform that needs to take place for sure, I think.
Yeah, I obviously we agree with it, that it should be ended. Look, there's a growing pile of research that demonstrates how ineffective these targeted economic development policies are, these tax breaks and subsidies for special businesses. They don't actually deliver the economic growth that's promised with them. So the obvious answer to us is to eliminate them. It's in some ways a waste of money. And we saw a little bit of that in the most recent session with InvestARC. So Senator Lance Eads and Representative Andy Davis did a good job eliminating InvestARC, which is one of our biggest incentives, and fixing the tax code that it was really a Band-Aid for. But at the same time, we also saw some growth in incentives. Obviously, the big one that comes to mind is the expansion of Amendment 82 bonds, which we touched on earlier. There was also another $50 million put towards the Quick Action Closing Fund. And then the legislature expanded the waste reduction and recycling tax credit. So on one hand, you had some good, but on the other hand, you had some bad. Our answer is overall comprehensive tax reform. And that's something that Jeremy touched on earlier with our project, Arkansas, the Roadmap to Tax Reform, where we give some ideas where the broad principle is to broaden the tax base, lower rates, and get rid of these special tax breaks and subsidies for individual businesses.
Yeah.
If you want to grow the economy and attract businesses here, we say don't do it with special targeted favors. Lower taxes for everyone. That's what will make them come. And Jacob has an entire book he wrote on this. Came out last summer. He was on your program talking about it. That's on our website too.
Jacob, real quick, you mentioned education earlier. You seem to be very knowledgeable about it. One of your reform ideas for the education spending crisis would be, quote, Arkansas should remove its arbitrary cap on the number of open enrollment charter schools. Again, that's not status quo, but, I mean, we need to change in status quo.
Right. And what we're really looking at here is a question of efficiency, right? So we've seen this big growth in education spending, but we haven't seen the increase in educational outcomes that we'd hope to see with that. So one thing that we like to look at is our neighbor Oklahoma. Their natural kind of comparison to us because they have similar poverty levels. But they have similar test scores to what we have, except they spend about $2,000 less per student than we do. So they're more efficient at it, right? And what we're getting at with increasing open enrollment charter schools or a voucher program is to increase competition. Because in the education marketplace, schools compete on quality. They don't necessarily compete on price like in the private market with Walmart and Amazon. They're competing on quality. So if you can incentivize schools to provide a better quality education, you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to get higher test scores all the way around. And we've seen a little bit of that here in Arkansas. So in 2015, the state did a charter school evaluation, and they found that open enrollment charter schools perform better in literacy and no worse in math than traditional public schools, but that the charter schools got about $1,000 per pupil less than the traditional public schools did.
Wow.
So in some ways,
doing better for less
you could say
money.
that charter schools were more efficient at getting those educational outcomes than traditional public schools were.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we only have a minute left, and I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl and Mr. Jacob Bundrick. We appreciate you guys, and I'd love to do this again soon. And, if there's anything that we didn't cover that you guys, want to come back on and talk about, you are welcome literally anytime. You're welcome on tomorrow if you want. So,
Well, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. And again, the website is uca.edu/ACRE. Get a copy of this report. Arkansas's out. To me, I'm defining it. It's out of control spending, but it's a great report with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and really, really good stuff highlighting the history of it's a lesson in the growth of Arkansas government, because I believe you grow spending, you're growing government, you're increasing the responsibilities that the government really at this point is making for themselves. We got one more hour coming your way next.
Rush, Glenn.